Hi, I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking, and this time I've been thinking about the menopause. And before I get started, I just want to say that this is intended to be a safe watch for everyone, so you don't need to look away if you're squeamish. It'll be okay. So, I've been thinking about the menopause because I've been on that journey myself now for about 5 years. And I've learnt a lot in that time. Much of what I've learnt was a big surprise to me, even though I've been a woman for more than 50 years. And so because of those surprises, I wanted to make a video to share some of the things that I've learned, because I wish I'd known about them sooner. And I had a much harder time than I could have had just because I didn't have enough information to be able to help myself. So if I can help other people to avoid that, I'd like to try. So usually my videos are about subjects that really interest me. And so this one is a bit different because I'm not sure that I would have leaned into it quite as much if it hadn't impacted my own life in such a big way. It's definitely still an interesting subject, but my motivation was more connected to self-help than genuine curiosity. That was still a good motivator, and I've done quite a lot of research about it. I also learnt a lot from my own experiences, so I've got a few things that I think will be useful to share, in case they can help other people. So that's what I want to do today. So, what even is menopause? Personally, I don't remember learning anything about it when I was growing up. And maybe I just blanked it out as boring or not relevant. Or maybe it was probably one of those taboo subjects that you weren't supposed to talk about. I do remember being told that certain sort of older female relatives couldn't join in with things anymore because they were living on their nerves. I'm sure I had no idea what that even meant at the time, but I do have a bit more understanding of it now. So, biologically speaking, menopause marks the end of the reproductive years, but in reality, for a lot of people, there's much more to it than that. And it can be really confusing and scary time, not just for the person it's happening to, but also the people around them. There's some big changes that can start to happen, affecting things like personality, physical appearance, even outlook on life. And, if things have been stable for quite a few years before that, it can be really unnerving to start experiencing such big changes. And I think maybe there can be a tendency for people to only think about menopause as when the monthly cycle stops and maybe the hot flashes start. I'm pretty sure that that's what I thought. And also what probably led me to having no idea that all the problems and strange symptoms that I was experiencing were connected to menopause. It was only afterwards, when I realised what was happening, that I was able to understand that it was all connected. And I wasn't suddenly afflicted by loads of different problems and illnesses. Maybe other people are more aware than I was, but I want to share a bit more about what happened to me, in the hope, of helping other people and maybe helping them to realise what's happening if their experience is similar to mine. So I'll tell you briefly about some of the things that started happening to me, which at the time were really frightening. So here we go. In no particular order, I had a burning tongue, as if I'd eaten something spicy. I had muscle twitches, especially in the night, and they would wake me up. I had fluttering and tapping sounds in my ears. I had random vibrations in my body, like having a mobile phone buzzing, but in my leg or my foot. My hair started to fall out in quite big clumps. My fingernails were splitting and breaking. I had styes in my eyes. I had heart palpitations and random thumps that were really unnerving. I had a kind of skin crawling sensation, like I had little bugs or splashes of water on my legs mostly, but there were no bugs and no water when I checked. I had pain in my joints, my thumbs, my wrists, my elbows. I had numbness and tingling, especially when I would wake up in the morning. It could be my arms, my thumbs, my knees, and it would take a while to get the feeling back. And sometimes the tips of my fingers would feel painful, strangely. And one of the worst things was the anxiety. I started to feel scared of things that previously I'd been fine with. Things like driving my car or even just not being at home. And I often felt scared with no obvious reason for being scared. And as well as all of that, I felt tired and groggy and confused, sometimes all day long. And I often couldn't remember how to do simple things like switching on my computer. So I actually feel quite sad thinking back over all those things. There were probably more than I've even mentioned, but those are the ones that stand out as, and have stayed in my memory. And even thinking about it now, it still seems strange to think that all of those random things could be connected to menopause. But since I've taken some action to balance my hormones, they've pretty much all gone away. So, it does seem clear to me that they were all connected. So since that's happened to me, I've, felt quite compelled to try and raise awareness for other people, because I was really scared at the time and I thought my body must be going wrong in all sorts of ways and maybe couldn't be saved, which, I know sounds dramatic, but I couldn't see any other explanation for all those things going wrong at once. And I still had a monthly cycle and no hot flashes, so there was nothing that I knew of to point me towards the real cause. So I'm not someone who's ever really visited the doctor much in my life, but I did seek help with some of those things, and I didn't know that they were all connected. And in the UK, we're only supposed to go with one problem at a time. So, I asked for help with some of them, but as individual problems. And my doctor was helpful, and I learnt quite a lot of things from that. So, I learnt that there is a thing called burning tongue syndrome, and I learnt that no serious health conditions start with muscle twitches. I learnt that hair can sometimes fall out after an illness, and that styes in your eyes can be soothed with a hot compress. I learnt that painful joints can often be expected as you get older. So I was a bit reassured by that information, but of course it didn't make any of the symptoms go away. And I managed to keep going for a while longer, but really the breaking point for me was when the anxiety got so bad that I really couldn't carry on with my day-to-day life. And I was very close to quitting my job because I just didn't feel capable of it anymore. So I went back to the doctor to ask for some help with the anxiety. And it was this time that the doctor suggested that the anxiety could be related to menopause. And that was the real light bulb moment for me. And I realised that until that point, I hadn't even considered menopause as a possibility at all. It still amazes me now to think that I could have been so unaware. So even though it can be a bit of a taboo subject, I I want to make it my goal to talk about it more and to raise awareness for other people. So the doctor gave me the option of antidepressants for the anxiety or hormone replacement therapy, HRT, to see if hormones were the cause. So I decided to go with the HRT option, even though I'd always thought that I'd be someone who wouldn't want or need that to get through menopause. I'm not sure why I thought that, but I guess I just assumed that I'd be tough enough to get through it on my own. But I was very wrong about that. So, the difference when I started taking HRT was like night and day. And so that's when I really realised how all of those other symptoms were connected. And, since I've been taking a stronger interest in the subject, I've found out how many other symptoms can also potentially be linked to menopause. So, in a way, I should feel lucky not to have had more. So, if you or someone you know is in their late 30s or their 40s and is having unusual health issues or a personality change, I hope that you'll think about this video and question whether it's really a hormone issue. It was so easy to fix with the right treatment, and yet I was so close to making some big decisions about my life that really wouldn't have been right for me, and could have jeopardised my future, but seemed unavoidable at the time because of the way that I was feeling. It scares me to think about it, and I really want this video to help raise awareness of what it can be like. So I really appreciate anyone who's watching it. Thank you. So I do have another bit of personal experience that I think other people may find interesting or useful, and that's the connection between the start of menopause symptoms being triggered by a traumatic event. So while I've been learning and researching about the subject, I've seen it mentioned a few times that this can happen, and I can certainly relate to it. So I was curious about why a traumatic event might trigger menopause symptoms. So I did a bit more research about that. And it seems that one of the first hormones to start dropping away in menopause is progesterone. And progesterone also drops away or gets used up during times of stress or trauma. So I think it makes sense that if my progesterone was already getting low, and then a stressful event comes along, it can really tip that balance even further to the point where it's enough to start experiencing those menopause symptoms. And once I started replacing my depleted progesterone, things felt very different. So if you're interested in how I know it was the progesterone, I actually found that out by accident because I started replacing estrogen first, and that didn't help me at all. But when I added progesterone, it made all the difference. So I know everyone's experience can be different, but I'm just sharing what happened to me. So now I try to keep in mind that if my life gets stressful, I probably need a bit more progesterone. And it's nice to feel that I can use what I've learnt to make my life a bit better. I do have a HRT prescription, but I also buy a progesterone cream that I can use as much or as little as I want, depending on what's going on in my life. So now that I've got things a bit more under control, I'm enjoying life again and I feel calm and I'm looking forward to the future. And things could have been very different if I hadn't worked out what was happening and found the right solution. And I know there must be a lot of women out there who are suffering, and if this video can find its way to some of them, then I'll be very happy about that. I want people to know that there is a way out and you can get your life back and feel good again. I'm not fully in menopause yet because you have to have gone a complete year without a monthly cycle, and that hasn't happened for me yet. But I'm not afraid of it now. I don't know if I'll need to take HRT forever. I don't take as much now as I did before, so I think the body does eventually adjust to the lower hormone levels and things can settle back down. You know, and I think it makes sense that the big fluctuations in hormone levels are in the run-up to menopause and probably do eventually calm down. Now, I think I'm getting closer to that stage now because I've been gradually able to reduce my HRT and mostly without any of those symptoms coming back. It probably helps that I've also learned more about how to support my health in other ways, but I'll speak more about that in another video. So I hope that by sharing my story in this video, I'll be able to help someone else. I know it would have helped me a few years ago to have had this kind of information. So I hope you've taken something useful from this video, but I think that's all for this time. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next time. Bye.